Welcome to Man in America. I'm your host, Seth Holehouse. I have an incredible interview for you today, someone that I've had a chance to ask some of my wildest questions about how the world works in the deep state, and it's the man Patrick Byrne. You've probably heard of him. The Overstock CEO became incredibly wealthy, but somehow got pulled into some spy operations and was involved in, as he'll explain to you in today's interview, is a few kind of really interesting things that we'll talk about. How he was supposed to bribe Hillary Clinton on behalf of Barack Obama so that the Obama faction could have blackmail control over the Clinton faction, which is interesting to say the least. He also details the various factions within the Democratic Party and how they've been orchestrated and where Biden fits in, where Obama fits in, where Harris fits in, what happens with the coup with the Democratic Party around the election, and how Biden wouldn't step down, so they kind of forced him out, and Kamala stepped in, and it's quite complicated because we're going to touch on those topics, but also get into some of the more bigger geopolitical questions. Who are the power players at the top? How does the city of London tie into the CCP? Are they working together or are they working against each other? What was happening in 2020 with these factions? Who's controlling Barack Obama? There's a million questions that we get into, including Israel and the role of Israel in this global geopolitical mess that we have right now, but also what Patrick sees and what he hopes for in the next 4 years of Trump and what he thinks can be accomplished. So, folks, it's going to be a wild ride. I hope you enjoy it. Just a reminder that if you're watching on Rumble, thank you for supporting free speech. Make sure you hit that follow button. And the other thing, too, is if you enjoy this interview, if you enjoy the content, please share it with your friends and family. Unfortunately, because I talk about things that the government doesn't like, you don't see my videos going viral on YouTube because I'm heavily shadow banned over there. And so it's actually people like you that like the content and share it that enable me to reach a lot more people with this information, which is really important. So folks, please enjoy the show. Do you keep hearing more cases of your friends and family getting a life-threatening diagnosis of cancer? Or perhaps it's even happened to you? Well, the unfortunate reality is that turbo cancer is now a worldwide epidemic. But the question we should all be asking is, what can I do about it? Well, the good news is that there are therapies that are working and proven in thousands of clinical studies. So one study on PubMed found that breast cancer's growth rate dropped by 40% in only 24 hours after using red light therapy. Another study on prostate cancer found that 49% of the over 400 male participants went into remission with just one red light therapy session. A lymphoma cancer pilot study showed that 3 out of 3 of the patients became cancer-free. It sounds unbelievable, but it's true. And you can discover all this information and more in a special training program from investigative medical journalist Jonathan Otto, who will show you how you can use red light, including the specific wavelengths as proven by studies, for all different types of cancer, as well as tinnitus, weight loss, wrinkles, acne, dementia, cognitive function, depression, anxiety, long COVID, jab injuries, stem cell regeneration, lower back pain, sciatica, the whole array of autoimmune diseases, including thyroid disease, arthritis, lupus, and gut disorders, and so much more. In fact, you can get your own in-home red light therapy device risk-free, as you're completely covered by a 60-day money-back guarantee and a 3-year warranty. On top of that, we've got financing options so you can get it now and pay later. And the best thing, folks, is that this technology has become amazingly affordable. It's way less than you'd expect, with the smaller units costing only a couple $100. So just go to myredlight.com to make sure you don't miss out this free special training program and claim the extremely limited time bonus gifts and discounts, which include an additional 10% off with the coupon code SETH. Again, go to myredlight.com to get access to the free training. And if you make a purchase, make sure you use a promo code SETH, that's SETH, to get an additional 10% off the already heavily discounted red light therapy products. Mr. Patrick Byrne, I feel like that we should have been doing a show 2 or 3 years ago, but finally here we are, and it's a pleasure to have you on the show. So thanks for joining us today.
It's great to be on, Seth. Thank you.
So you are such an interesting character in this overall story, I guess, that we're living through. That you were the CEO of. Now, were you the founder or the CEO of Overstock? I mean, you had some
Yes.
big role there, right?
I've founded it and led it for 20 years and then punched out in order to take on the deep state.
There you go. And so You've got a really interesting story, which and I'll pull up and we'll talk about more. But the Thayers, Matt and Joy over at Spirit Pictures have done an amazing job with a docuseries, called The Enemy Within, that's documenting just the wild tale of your life. And obviously, we're not going to explain the whole thing right now, but um, I've got a handful of different questions about your story and my understanding.
Sure.
Eh, So
Anything you want.
so basically, well, I guess walk us through just like the little elevator pitch of your the FBI and your involvement and how it tied into to Russia and how it was used against you. I guess as much of an elevator pitch can come out of such a complex story.
I'll do an elevator pitch. It's very complicated. It's basically the movie The Sting inside of Michael Clayton inside of 3 Days of the Condor. But the elevator pitch is as difficult it is to believe. I've had this lifelong relationship with the government, and I thought that was going to die with me. It would never. Barack Obama elevated me to the very heights of such things in 2010, but it goes back many decades. I'm not a spook. I'm not a CIA guy, but I've worked with every other part of the government. I was mostly involved with peace, and also with crime fighting in the USA. However, in 2015, I got used. Well, the Russian collusion drama putatively starts in July of 2016, but the truth is it all started July of 2015. The Durham report's a cover-up. The Durham report gets accurate what happened after July of 2015, but it's buried from a full year of activity before that, where it was all set up. I was part of the setup, and as part of that, I was guided to have a relationship with Maria Butina, who's this famous Russian intellectual grad student who was over here who ended up in her own trouble. So that whole thing that happened to her was a setup, and I was the guy who set it up. Secondly, in the middle of that, they pulled me off to have me bribe Hillary Clinton. I arranged an $18 million bribe for Hillary Clinton. And then that turned out to be just a bribery and blackmail scheme. Barack Obama and John Brennan wanted her to take a bribe so they could then blackmail her and own her while she was president. And so it was a soft coup. And there's a scene in the movie where these words are spoken to me that, Patrick, you need to, when they explained to me they weren't going to prosecute her after they knew she took the bribe, that think of there as being a Bunsen burner within the heart of the Department of Justice. And the information about the bribe is going to sit on the Bunsen burner. The hand on the Bunsen burner is going to be one of Barack Obama's people. If she's a good girl, defends Obamacare, the flame stays low. If she's a bad girl and thinks for herself, that flame goes up. And then she's going to sit down and Michelle's going to run. And Patrick, that's the plan. The plan turned out to be called Operation Snow Globe. My bribe was just the bait to lure her to step into the snow globe. And what they did not know was I'd been sent to investigate them. And I know the story gets crazier and crazier, but in 2006, the Senate Judiciary Committee had gotten to know me for about a year, and they had used me spying against different parts of the government, trying to find corruption. And they had told me that they had the ultimate power to investigate corruption in the US, that they did. And so that they had their power transcended every other power in government. And they used me in different situations to try to find corruption within the government. And then in 2006, they presented me a letter and they said, this has not been done since World War II, but we are making it basically impossible for you to be prosecuted. You need to spend your life. We think there's some kind of corrupt force taking over the United States government. It's our job to stop it. We can't stop it, but you're going to stop it for us. And here's this letter, and it makes no one's ever going to touch you. You can't go kill anybody, but short of that, no prosecutor's going to touch you. We need you to spend your life disrupting whatever this corruption is. So that's what I did. And so then the final scene in that is they had me come back and had me re-engage with Maria Butina. They'd had me break up, then they had me re-engage. So I recognized that as an opportunity to set up Barack Obama and Hillary and John Brennan and James Comey. So I self-reported that I had drugged Maria Butina in order to question her. And Brennan and Comey and Obama were okay with that. So then I self-reported that while I had knocked her out with drugs and then questioned her, I'd had sex with her. Well, that would be rape. Barack Obama and John Brennan and James Comey were okay with that. So then I offered to murder her. And so it was the big setup on my own chain of command. And the funniest part was that whole time with Maria Butina. So there were two different periods we saw each other. The first time was very physical. The second time, I deliberately didn't lay a hand on her so that she would have this very clear memory. I just treated her like the daughter of the czar. So she would have this super clear memory. And this was all verified by her. And she, in fact, shows up at the end of the movie and talks about it. Yeah, I didn't lay a finger on her and made sure she would remember things that way. But I reported this crazy stuff up my chain of command to see what their limits were. And the big secret, I'm told this, the biggest secret they're trying to figure out how to spin within the US government is, how do you spin this? That President Barack Obama signed a presidential finding instructing 3 federal agents to overlook their belief that I had drugged, raped, and was going to murder a girl so that we could continue setting up this fake Russia hoax. And Barack Obama put his signature on that. The same month, Donald Trump got in so much trouble for that Access Hollywood tape, I tricked Barack Obama into signing off on rape and murder. So that's in a real nutshell. And if it all sounds wild, I can say that in the book, General Flynn wrote the introduction. He confirmed that, as crazy as it sounds, yes, I'm a 3-star general of military intelligence. And yes, I know about Patrick Byrne. He has worked for the government his whole life. And secondly, Maria Butina comes on at the end of the movie and verifies what I'm telling you.
Wow. So I've got a lot of different questions.
I tricked Barack Obama into signing off on rape and murder.
My goodness. And so, well, I guess one question, just so I think that a lot of people, we form these very simplistic views for how the deep state works and how these entities work. And I think that for folks that are kind of researching and trying to understand it, it's, we almost Hollywood things, right? Oh, there's a pyramid of power and everyone's subservient and, this stuff. But so even if you look at this relationship between Obama and Hillary, so like you have this perception that they're all just kind of working together, but the fact that there's even at those levels that there's so there's blackmail. So Obama is at that time was working to blackmail even Hillary, so that would be another way they could control her as a puppet for them, basically.
There's different flavors of the deep state. There's a deep state, but there are different flavors of the deep state, is how I would put it. And they all work against each other, and more importantly, they work against the American Republic. There's a whole bunch of people in Washington who have no confidence in the institutions of our republic. They think that it's an anachronism, the Constitution is an anachronism, and what it really needs is experts like them in this complicated world. We need some experts at the top to run things. And the Constitution was written and structured to prevent people like that from running things. So their whole life, really for 100 years, has been about subverting the Constitution. And that's the nature of progressive politics, basically, is to say the Constitution is just this dead document, and we smarty pants really know how to do things better now. If only we experts could be involved.
And so a lot of this scheme obviously centered around Maria, right, who was a Russian, and young, attractive, intelligent Russian, and you're kind of getting into a relationship with her, like almost like it seems like it's almost a reverse honeypot where you're kind of using.
I'm the Red Sparrow. The funniest thing I've heard. I'm the Red Sparrow.
And so, but in that, I mean,
as I say in the movie, I'm a lot taller and handsomer when I stand on my wallet.
Yeah, well, there you go. So, did you fall in love with her? Like, was there a difficult process in that tugged at your own heartstrings? And did she know what was behind your intentions with this?
She does now, and she's forgiven me. But she spent 18 months in jail because of me, and yet she's forgiven me. She's a lovely young woman. She was terribly mistreated by our country. I'm felt bad, but on the other hand, I had this crazy request. My overarching task was I had a request from 300 million Americans who in 2006 elected a Senate, which chose a Senate Judiciary Committee, who told me, Patrick, there's some kind of corrupt force taking over the US government. It's our job to stop that, and we can't stop it. So we're delegating this, we're tasking you. You're going to this is how you're going to spend your life, Patrick. You're going to figure out how to stop this. We might not even be senators when you finish. We might not even be alive when you finish. But there's this letter that's going to be in a safe the rest of your life. This had not been done since World War II, they told me. In World War II, there was a concern of German sympathizers within the government. And an American businessman was asked to become a German sympathizer and help flush the other German sympathizers out. And they told me all this, and it's kind of funny. It's all word for word. The scenes that are in the movie are pretty much word for word what happened in real life. So it's people say I've had people interview say, look, I drove to church and I just started watching it in the parking lot. I thought I would watch the first episode, and you made me miss church because I sat there and I couldn't put it down. People really end up binge watching it. It's pretty exciting. It's got robbery, blackmail, rape, murder, espionage, everything you want, and it's all true to life.
It's incredible. And what I'll do is I'll play the trailer after our interview. I'll make sure we cut that in so folks can watch the trailer, because the Thayers are just, I know Matt and Joy, they're so talented.
This was good. So well made.
It looks amazing. And so, one question I have is, you think the American dream, right? Okay, hey, you're tech startup CEO, millions and millions of dollars, and you could, private jets, and like that's that's everything that everyone wants, right? Supposedly in America, but why the government work? Why did you go, or why did you even begin this process, or what led to this process of just being a successful tech startup CEO and, being wealthy and independent? How'd you go from that to being on the inside of these, pretty significant spy and blackmail operations with the highest levels of our government?
It actually is the other way around. My first contact with this world was when I was 20 years old and a college student. I was over in China, and somebody approached me with a letter, and this is all explained in the movie, that to get into the hands of Uncle Sam. And from that point forward, there was a relationship between myself and some days it felt, to be honest, some periods of my life, it felt more like being an entrepreneur was my cover job. And what wow. The bulk of my energies and brain power was devoted to these other activities. And so it's the reverse order. It's almost like Overstock was my cover job. Not that I didn't do it. I really did it and they didn't help. But it was more like I already had this antecedent relationship. And I guess this country was far better to me than any of the Byrne family had expected. My family lived the Horatio Alger dream. We were broke as a joke when I was born. My father was on the GI Bill. We had no money. And over the course of by the time I was 16, he'd become a millionaire. And by the time I was 25, he'd become a multi-millionaire. But he was an Air Force ROTC guy out of Rutgers. And so we were always just very cognizant of that the country had been much better to us than we really had expected.
And so just to kind of fill the story in with Overstock, so you founded Overstock. Did you take it public? Did you sell it? What kind of happened with your exit there?
I took it public in 2002, and I did so in a way that infuriated Wall Street. I was the first company to do something called the Dutch auction model. And it infuriated Wall Street. And they told me, you'll be a pariah for life if you do go ahead with this. And I did it. And so I became quite this figure, notorious on Wall Street, antagonistic to Wall Street. From 2005 to 2008, I first was trying to expose a bunch of mischief on Wall Street. And this is where I started coming across corruption, because people were taking me out to dinner and proposing that we do illegal things, Wall Street types, hedge fund types, brokers. And I thought so I went and reported it. I thought that, like anyone would, I went and tried to explain to the authorities, do you realize this is what's going on Wall Street? And the indolence of the authorities really shocked me. And that's when I started realizing around 2005 that they were that the corruption that the SEC was really the SEC was captured. Economists called it. It was captured by Wall Street, and then the FINRA, the regulator over NYSE and Nasdaq, and then the Senate Banking and House Financial Services and the financial press. It was all they were all they were all deep capture. It's called, and I just started realizing the whole system's corrupt. And people used to, they used to run pictures of me with UFOs coming out of my head, that it was some kind of conspiracy theory. And then '08 happened, and it went from being conspiracy theory to the stuff of late night comedy. That of course the SEC is in bed with Wall Street, and everybody got how corrupt everything is. And now in 2024, I mean, a blind man can see how corrupt our society is, especially this week, given what just happened with the president. But it's become, I mean, this stuff doesn't pass the laugh test, is what I would say. It doesn't pass the laugh test. Yeah, not the smile test, which is that can you even keep a straight face describing this stuff? Now they can't even. I'm surprised they can keep from laughing as they defend the stuff they're doing.
Oh, it's crazy. It's crazy. And so, I mean, with all this background and walking through the story and being hyper aware of the deep state, and seeing behind the curtains, and I'm assuming you've met Barack Obama many times, right? Have you met Hillary
No, I've never
Clinton?
met him.
Okay,
I've
so you
never
were
met him.
okay, so you were just you
No, but
were,
I was his. I was reporting to handlers who were reporting directly to Brennan and Comey, who were reporting directly to Obama.
I see. And so looking at, and here's a curious question that's kind of popped up. Looking at the Biden administration, here, Harris and Biden, and seeing the coup that happened within that, but then also looking at the role of the Clintons, what would you say if you had to describe the power structure of of just the Democratic Party? What does it look like? Are there main factions? Who's leading the main factions? Like, where does Biden fit in? Where, Obama, Clinton, et cetera? What does that look like?
In the '90s, the Clintons took over the Democratic Party from the grassroots up. Every county in America has a Democratic office and a Republican Party office. They got Clintonistas in at the county level, and then they elected the state. So they took over in this Leninist fashion from the grassroots up. And it was theirs. And she was going to be president in '08. Barack Obama came in '08, and it's the Clintons just are about pure corruption. And by the way, Joe Biden, they were partners in that. The Clintons and Bidens were partners in that. But then Obama came along in '08, and he got this mass movement going, and he surprised that. He had some help. But he upset the apple cart within the Democratic Party. So in the Democratic Party, there's two factions: the Obamaites and the Clintonistas, who really just stand for corruption, and Obamaites stand for communism. I mean, they're communist tyrants, as we see. Biden straddled the two, and Obama made him president. But Obama, in making him president, he's been the string puller, and the string is named Susan Rice. So Dr. Susan Rice she's over all through the Biden administration. Susan Rice was over at Obama's house at 7:30 in the morning, and then going over to the White House at 8:30, and she was, I think, domestic policy advisor. But she was really the string, and Obama was the string puller. Obama himself, though, isn't the puppet master. There's hands behind him. There's hands behind him that pull his strings. And that's really the whole Soros, WF, Klaus Schwab world. And then that fell apart starting in around March of this year, where the plan was for Biden to step aside, and then Michelle was going to run. Biden would not step aside. So Obama, and there was a shouting match in the Oval Office on a Saturday morning, at which point, and Jill Biden was very much trying to keep her husband from stepping aside. So eventually Obama said, go ahead, why don't you do a debate with Trump? He did a debate in late June. The world and the press, which really reports to Obama, said it was given permission. Okay, now you can talk about what's been obvious to the rest of us for 4 years. This guy is not even mentally competent. And So he was destroyed by that. So Jill Biden and Joe Biden feel like they were thrown under the bus. So eventually Kamala Harris went to them and said, I'm going to join. Everyone wants been wanting the 25th Amendment you. I've been refraining, but now I'm going to join in 25th Amendment you unless you say you're not running again. So Biden agreed to step down and not run again. 2 minutes later, and what Obama wanted to happen was there was going to be a open primary, open convention probably, and Michelle or Hillary would have won. Instead, Joe Biden saved things by, well, it was actually Jill. Jill, 2 minutes, 3 minutes after Joe agreed not to run again, and that was announced, Jill put out a press release in her husband's name saying that we endorse Kamala Harris, which kind of screwed up all their plans. And I think that I'm surprised Obama just didn't go through it with anyway. It didn't matter. I mean, who cared who Joe Biden endorsed? But anyway, so they were stuck with Kamala Harris and trying to drag that wretch over the finish line turned out to be impossible, even with multiple billions of dollars, even with all the money from China, even with the entire media covering up who she really was, and on and on and on, they could not get her installed. And that's really what happened.
I see. Incredible. And well, here's just a quick question. Do you think that the Bidens voted for Trump?
Yes. Well,
Really?
Trump came out and said it, and I would think he's telling the truth. I think that they came when Trump went and visited them in the White House a few days after the election, or a week later, he posted that Joe and Jill said, "This is the first time we voted Republican, but we voted for you." I would imagine he's telling the truth.
I would think so too.
They did not deny it.
And so looking into actually the foreign countries, obviously we have these globalist organizations, the WEF, et cetera, and they've got their hands in a lot of these things. But in terms of, say, Obama and who's pulling his strings, right? So when I look at this, when I'm trying to map out, I've kind of had this understanding that the same factions that you're seeing battling within, say, the Democrat Party, that there's also multiple factions globally that are fighting. Like, it's not like there's just one central pyramid and everyone's controlled by the European bankers and I think there's multiple factions like the CCP. We've got, Israel. We've got, a lot of different things happening at the bigger level of, geopolitically. You have the BRICS nations, you have NATO. It's complicated. So when you're kind of tracing up above Obama, what do you see? Like, who do you see as some of the larger entities that are pulling his strings?
The two main ones are the CCP and the WEF / Central European Powers, the House of Hanover. They've never, for 250 years, they've always resented that the US got free. And that really is a consortium of when people say Rothschilds, what they should say is the City of London. And frankly, the Vatican, and it's the WF Davos Klaus Schwab world. And that's one center of power, and the CCP is the other. They cooperated on the takedown of America. But what they had was different visions of what happened then. The WEF crowd wants a global government, Central Europe, maybe Ukraine, or rebuilt Ukraine. It's the UN, WHO, WEF, that whole supranational governance, and that all comes out of the Club of Rome project. And the Club of Rome, that's one project. The CCP has the same vision of the world, but they just think the center of gravity should be Beijing. And it's a Confucian world order based off, in concentric circles, off Beijing. And that everything is a vassal state of one degree or another to Beijing. But they agreed on they got to take down America, and they agreed that on the plan of that there should be some kind of global government. But that's why after 2020 and the rigged election, within a year or two, that alliance split apart. And you had guys like George Soros come out and saying Xi Jinping's the enemy of humanity. They thought they were going to be able to work out some compromise then, but they were not able to. They're both vying for that central, to be that capital, so to speak.
Imagine a future where your wealth is untouchable, a future where every decision you make today creates a foundation of security for tomorrow. Right now, optimism fills the air. A new chapter under Trump is beginning and opportunities seem endless. Markets are climbing, spirits are high. But beneath the surface, whispers of change grow louder. Policies, tariffs, and global shifts are shaping a new economic landscape. The US dollar holds strong, but what happens when the world questions its place, which is already happening? What happens when nations turn away from the familiar and toward the uncertain? Gold is different. For centuries, it has been an anchor in the times of change, a hedge against inflation, a shield against volatility, a sanctuary when the world feels unsteady. Gold doesn't follow the tides, it remains steadfast, unyielding, and enduring. Close your eyes and imagine your wealth secure. Imagine your future unshaken. This is the promise of gold, a tangible investment free from the whims of politics and markets. The time to act is now. While optimism reigns and markets soar, remember that true wisdom comes from preparing for what others cannot see. Gold is not just an investment, it is your anchor, your protection, your legacy. Take the first step towards securing your future. And there's no better company to work with than Noble Gold. Protect your future. Act now. Call 626-654-1906 or visit goldwithseth.com to get your free gold and silver investment guide. Again, that's 626-654-1906 or goldwithseth.com.
And when I say that the Vatican's in on it, I don't mean in some Illuminati sense, but there's a vision that some people have that the world would be a better place if there were some group among us, if there was some supranational state, like that, if all nations were but a confederacy with some global capital, and some chosen among us would be the ones to run that, and that's how the world should be organized. Now, they just have different views of who the chosen are, but communists, Trotskyites especially, that it's you can view this as neo-Trotskyitism, which is the view that there should be this communist revolution, and ultimately that Russia should be the center of gravity of things. Socialists in general believe this worldview, and there's a deeply corrupt mafia that runs Venezuela. And at the heart of that corruption, the Catholic Church is involved. And there's a very important archbishop from Venezuela who's moved, and he's the right-hand man to this Pope. And he, in fact, runs the Bank of the Vatican, which is a completely corrupt organization that does the banking for cartels. The Venezuelan cartel does its banking in the Bank of the Vatican. So the Vatican's in all of this. The Venezuelan cartel put like $40 billion of Australian bonds in the Vatican that pay, I think, like a 10% premium. And all that premium goes to the bank. That's the deal. So the Venezuelan cartel funds the Vatican to the tune of $4 billion a year. And who pays the piper calls the tune. And then when people talk, so the whole, I mean, I know some years ago this would have all sounded crazy, conspiratorial to me, but I've been up the skirts of Venezuela for the last 4 years. I can say Venezuela, I mean, they're not the mastermind of all this, but they are a deep player in it. And so there's a Cuban-Venezuelan espionage effort to take down the United States. But if the farther up the tree you go, you get to Iran and you get to China. But you also get the people who share this vision of a global government include the Trotskyites, the Davos, the WEF, the UN crowd. And it's all completely antithetical. To these kind of people, a constitutional republic is anathema, because what a constitutional republic is about is limited government. As Jefferson said, it is mistrust and not confidence that causes us to write constitutions. Because but for people who have these grand visions of how to reorganize the world, our Constitution stands in the way. So they have to disrupt the constitutional republic that is America. And that's how everything lines up.
It's very
And when I
interesting.
say,
Go ahead.
yeah, when I say the City of London, that's the last main element. People, when they say the Rothschilds, what they really should be talking about is a dozen families who run the City of London. The City of London is its own nation, sovereign territory. And once a year, it's a square mile in downtown metropolitan London. And once a year, the Queen, or now the King, takes a carriage from Buckingham Palace with a clump of earth from Buckingham grounds. And the Queen would, I don't know if King Charles has done it yet, but the Queen has to go in and take off her shoes and bow her head and shuffle up to the mayor of the City of London and present a cup of earth. And he shows her the crown jewels. And then she curtsies and shuffles, So she is showing her field that ultimately the king and queen of England are actually subjects of the City of London. And the City of London is 12 banking families.
Incredible.
And that's all, like, you can look that up, that there's this 650-year-old ceremony that occurs once a year. England, Britain itself, the King of Britain or the Queen of Britain is herself, has to do that once a year so she never forgets that she's actually
Subservient.
serving to the bank.
Wow. Gosh, it's interesting because the research that I've done, I've arrived at a similar conclusion that I really believe that there are these two primary factions globally, like the CCP, which I call the CCP Frankenstein's monster, because I think that if you look in the origins of the CCP, it was Yale in China, it was the Jesuits, it was kind of spawned from these European banking families to get this communism going. But I think that they've grown into their own kind of thing. If you look at their own speeches and leaked speeches, it's very clear that they want to be the ones ruling the world. They're not going to bow to some banking family out of London. It's antithetical to their 5,000-year culture, the divine, the heavens mandate that they ruled by, right? And
It
so
sounds like you know about the leaked speech of the
Chi Hao
General
Tian.
Churchill.
Oh, I've done whole shows on it, just reading the
Oh yeah,
speech and breaking it down. It's like, to me, that like explains you can't understand global geopolitics today without understanding that speech and the fact that China needs to colonize America to feed their own people and how they want to wipe us out with biological weapons and um, so yeah,
yeah,
it's pretty wild.
it's so funny when people say this is conspiracy theory. Just go, that guy, Hao Tian, was the Minister of Defense, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and the vice chairman of the Communist Party all at the same time. It's as if we had our Secretary of Defense, our chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and the vice president all were in the same person. And when he retired in 2003, he gave that speech and it leaked in 2005 or 2008. And the Epoch Times had brought that public. And the Chinese have never denied that speech, by the way. Never
Exactly.
denied it.
Well, it's also, can people say, oh, well, China's the boogeyman and, this is McCarthyism to say, oh, it's the communists. And like, well, no, it is. Like, look what they're doing to their own people and look at this and you can make sense of it. And so where do you see, and this is kind of, it's interesting. So obviously you look at Trump getting in, and Trump has been someone that has been very aggressively strong arming China. And he is now making very strong threats to, to try to halt the de-dollarization efforts by the BRICS, which is, that's an act of war. Destroying the currency of the West is war. But obviously we've weaponized the currency against them as well, by kicking Russia out of the SWIFT system, et cetera. So there's this huge battle going on, but I've seen Trump getting elected, which I look as a good thing for our country. But you also can see that there's a very strong alignment to Israel, right? He's received hundreds of millions of dollars. There's been a lot of his cabinet are very pro-Israel. And my kind of where I've arrived at in this is I think that most governments themselves are very corrupted, and we the people are the ones that are the cannon fodder. But I've looked at it and thought to myself that is Trump like, well, he basically, if you look at these two factions that are battling out, that he almost has to pick one of those sides that he thinks is going to be better for America, because he can't just be independent against the entire world, at this stage at least. So do you think that a lot of the alignment with Israel and some of those kind of factions is in part something that because he sees the real threat of the CCP and the BRICS nations, and that we have to have some sort of backing globally. Otherwise, America is just independent and we're being attacked again, like in 2020 by these multiple giant criminal factions that are all trying to collapse America. Like, how do you see, I guess, yeah, how do you see that all fitting together, and where does Israel fit into that?
Well, as I've said in other forums, it's kind of funny. As a child, I majored in Catholic and I minored in Jew. I know more about matters Judaic than anyone named Patrick in the world. But I guess and those feelings led me always to be super pro Israel. I guess my feelings have somewhat changed over the last few years. I've become aware that within Judaism, there's a non-trivial faction who actually hates us. Hates, and I'd say us, I'd say that have other ambitions for the world. And they have another ambition they're another candidate for the chosen people who will guide the world. And I used to view that as a benign instinct coming from them. I don't see it as so necessarily benign. There's a lot of Orthodox and hardcore left who don't have a benign interpretation of that at all. It's not that they're to be a light and set an example. It's something completely different. And I don't think they care at all. Netanyahu's recorded from 1990 in a talk that he didn't know he was being recorded. That he doesn't care at all about the United States. He just sees us as, they're going to use us like a doormat until there's nothing left. So I've become less of a completely staunch defender of Israel. I guess I go back to our founding fathers who said, let's avoid foreign entanglements. Washington said, avoid foreign entanglements. They were particularly concerned that we would get caught up in stuff from Southeast Europe at the time, and that you'd have people from both sides of the conflicts in what became the Balkans, and they would get into politics in America and drag us into stuff over there. And let's go back to building our gleaming city on the hill. I think that, to be honest, that on the other hand, I'm of two minds about it, because on the other hand, I think that Israelis, in fighting Hamas, not Arabs in general or Muslims in general, but in fighting Hamas, they're fighting the orcs. They're on the front line of civilization, holding off the orcs. So I want to support that. But I guess I'd say, if you really want to know the truth, the question is, would we do it again? Would we do it again? Was this a great idea? I think put it this way, if Israel fell, what I would do is say every Jew gets a US passport. There's nothing wrong with America that 6 million Jews couldn't fix. And I would want all of them to move to America. When Israel was formed, there was nobody on Truman's side other than one advisor who thought he should recognize it. But it was coming up. It was May 1948, and what was going on in May of 1948 besides the formation of Israel? Can you think? The American presidential campaign, and Truman needed New York. And the way he wasn't even clear Truman was going to be the Democratic nominee. He was deeply unpopular. He needed New York, and the convention was coming up 6 weeks later, and he recognized Israel, and he won New York in the primary, and he became president again. So, but no one, the military, like George C. Marshall, of whom I'm a great admirer, told him this will be, if you go along with the creation of this state, it will be a thorn in the Arab side forever. So I guess my deeper question is, would we do it again? I would have argued that it would have been better to recognize the right of return, to make America the new Jerusalem, and give all Jews globally the right of return to the United States, even if we had to put in a constitutional amendment for it. I would have supported that. On the other hand, you now look at it and say, well, the statute of limitations ran out on that decision. For good or bad, we created this state in the Middle East, and I don't see anything more artificial about it than I do about Saudi Arabia or Jordan or anything else. There was something called the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire lost, and its corpse was carved up. And there was a meeting in Italy in right after World War One, the St. Remo Conference, where they said, okay, out of the corps of Italy, here's the British mandate, here's the French mandate. I'm sorry, the French, English, and somewhere in here we're going to create a place for the Jews. And then there was the League of Nations, which reaffirmed it. And then in the mid 30s, there was another international conference where the world agreed to this. Out of the corpse of the Ottoman Empire, and we agreed on carving up. Here's where this country called Syria is going to be. Here's where Jordan is going to be. Here's where I'm in Qatar right now. That was created. All these boundaries were created out of the corpse of the Ottoman Empire. And so they created one for the Jews. I guess I don't see anything more artificial. The only thing different about it was that those borders were not finalized back then. They got finalized not in 2024, not in Sykes-Picot. They got finalized in 1948. And they didn't even really get finalized. So that's the only difference. But the existence of it is no less, the existence of Israel is not any more artificial than is the existence of Syria or the existence of Lebanon. The whole world agreed. We got this corpse of an Ottoman Empire to carve up, and they drew lines, but their lines in one area were kind of fuzzy, and it didn't work out so well afterwards. That's my thoughts on Israel. Probably just lost a whole bunch of friends on the Muslim side and a whole bunch of friends on the Jewish side. So
it's funny because like I used to work in the Diamond District at one point, and I worked I'd be in offices with 30 Hasidic Jews all of a sudden that, they're getting up and they're saying their prayer. And I'm the only like kind of non-Jew in there though. My beard, they always thought like, oh, you're Jewish. I'm like, no. So it's interesting. I've kind of seen inside of a lot of that culture. And so, but looking forward, right. Looking at the next 4 years.
Me too. And I'll tell you this, I always thought of them as brothers. I always thought of them as brothers and that we loved each other. What I have learned is there's a significant part of them who just view us as the doormat. And
Yeah. I mean,
after years of sort of looking very much believing in Judeo-Christianity as this tradition of stuff, my belief in that stuff has worn thin in the last 4 years.
yeah.
There are certainly, my great teachers were Jewish. There were certainly many who've been great to me in life and in business and in the Orthodox community. But what I've discovered is there's a whole bunch of Orthodox as well as the hardcore lefties who don't like us at all.
Yeah, that was my experience. I had some of them that were family and loved, just great relationships and business partnerships, but also I got screwed over a lot by others. I was their doormat. So it is what it is. But looking forward, with Trump getting back in, with Elon, with the Doge, the government efficiency. I mean, over the next 4 years, knowing the complexity of this system that controls our government, our politicians, and everything, but also knowing a lot about behind the scenes of Trump and what's happening with these things. Do you have hope? Do you have confidence that we can see some real change and some real rooting out of this corruption that's been running our country, and even the mission that it was given to you by the Senate, right? Back a long time ago. Do you think that can actually come to fruition in these next 4 years?
Yeah, if Trump had lost, it would have been the end of the American Republic. If Trump had lost, truth is, what we did was we rope-a-doped for 4 years. 2020 was supposed to be the end. We were never supposed to get, I think, to another election.
I agree.
This was a color revolution, and it was over. There was a reason Klaus Schwab said earlier this year. He said, 2024 is the year that elections become obsolete. This was supposed to be the end. We won. And the American Republic gets, and the history is going to say it was the American people who did that. This is we're the exceptional country because we fought our way through a color revolution without violence, and we got through. We're the only ones to ever do that, and we're still 48 days away. But with every passing day, it gets harder for them to do something crazy like declare martial law or something. So there's that. So Trump, absolutely, we have a fresh start, and I think he's got the right brains around him to do it. He's got Elon Musk. I hear Elon Musk quoting my great friend Milton Friedman and about what needs to be done. And yeah, this can be the rebirth of another 250-year run. We're going to have our 250th anniversary in Trump's term, if we get to Trump's term. And we can make the changes that buy us a new 250 years.
I feel the same. I do. Well, I know that you've got another interview coming up. I want to be mindful of your time. Before we do that, I want to bring up the website. So it's enemywithindocuseries.com. This is the documentary. This is my wife and I, we watch a lot of shows. We have a hard time finding non-woke shows to watch. Unfortunately, yes, we watch a lot of Indian or European, kind of other television because most American stuff sucks, unfortunately. But I can't wait to watch this with her. This is our next show we're going to watch. So it's enemywithindocuseries.com. I'll put a link in the description.
Or
Yep, go ahead.
if that's too much to remember, just remember patrickbyrnemovie.com and it will redirect you to that the same place. Or Enemy Within docuseries.
Oh, there we go.
Patrick Byrne movie.
Perfect. So Patrick, I feel like that we could go on for 10 more hours, but in closing, do you have any final thoughts before we sign off?
This has been what Ho Chi Minh called the war of the ants against the elephant. General Flynn called me on March 5th, 2021, and he said, Patrick, they have conquered everything. They've stolen the White House, they've stolen Congress, the state judiciaries are corrupt, the federal judiciary is corrupt or inactive. They have the media, they have total information dominance. The only thing they don't have is the American people. And we're going to build a movement together. Move to Florida and work with me. We're going to build a movement together. And I moved to Florida a few days later, and I spent 4 years with his his face should be on a mountainside someday, let me tell you. This whole thing would have fallen had it not been for him. Because President Trump, don't forget, he spent his first 2 years just sort of, after he was out of the White House, just down in Florida trying not to get thrown in jail. So General Flynn got this movement, but the movement depended on influencers and people like you who had the courage to stand up. Well, all the authorities, there was a period people wondered if they were going to be arrested to go on challenging the election and such. So it really took bravery on the part of, several dozen, maybe 100 at most, people like you who kept the flame alive. So thanks to you and your viewers.
Thank you. Heart. Yeah, it's a great audience. It's funny that actually General Flynn was one of the major influences that gave me the energy to start this show. It was he was talking about digital soldiers, information warfare, and that was before the 2020 election. He was talking about that stuff, and that was what was one of the major catalysts to starting the show. So, well, Patrick, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. I've got a lot more questions, but we'll do this again. I really enjoyed speaking with you. Thank you for giving us your time today.
Watch the show, and after you've watched it, I'll come back and we can talk about it some more.
It's a deal. Perfect. And we'll play the trailer now for everybody as well. Thank you so much, Patrick.
Thank you. My name is Patrick Byrne, domestic extremist threat number 1. Or not. Perhaps I'm just somebody who's willing to say the emperor has no clothes. You can decide for yourself.
Patrick Byrne.
They're following everything that you've been working on.
Yes, sir. Understood.
You may know of me as the CEO of this $2 billion e-commerce company, but really, I have this other life.
You have an unusual relationship with the United States government?
Sir, why are you bringing this up?
The FBI needed me to set up a bribe.
We can't have agents running around creating crimes.
It would violate too many rules for us to do it, but if you're willing to go do it, we'll look the other way.
Hello, my name is Maria Putina.
Then I would make it happen. Instead of being happy, they say,
just let it play. All right.
What?
Let it play?
Now, I know this may look like the Deep Throat scene from All the President's Men, but where do you think that stuff comes from? These things happen.
What you think you know.
I was encouraged to have a relationship.
What you think you are.
And it's heated up.
I'm going to meet the Trumps.
I was starting to realize the feds were using Maria to smudge up the Republican Party. And they were using me to use Maria. And this truth is going to be so explosive.
Erase every moment from your memory.
If you do this long enough, you begin to feel like an enemy of your own country.
They're going to arrest this Russian grad student so they could say, no, there is an actual Russian at the center of our Russian collusion drama. A civilization all begins with the rule of law. And once that gets corrupted, It's like my worst fears have just been realized. I don't know, maybe I'm just being sensitive.
So folks, this year I've given you so many reasons to try Balance of Nature, but I've got one now you cannot ignore. Let's review some of these other reasons. First, with Balance of Nature, you get a product made from whole fruit and veggie ingredients. Second, they can provide you with so many things you could be missing. Third, it could be just what you've been looking for to make you feel better. And of course, I take them. But I think that you'll agree this reason trumps them all. During November, with my special promo code, you'll get their Black Friday savings all month long. So folks, use my discount code SETH, S-E-T-H, and sign up as a new customer to get 50% off plus free shipping. As always, you get their money back guarantee. This is an unbelievable discount. But if you use my discount code SETH Seth, you'll get the discount. So folks, call them at 800-246-8751. Again, that's 800-246-8751 and use discount code Seth, or order online at balanceofnature.com. And remember, use discount code Seth to get 50% off plus free shipping.